Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. Hi, I'm Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, digital chaplain, person in recovery, and I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Anthony. I'm a 6-year doctoral student in clinical psych. I almost just fell off my chair, and I care about you.
Yeah, and I'm Lulu, and I am in recovery for alcohol, crystal meth. I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club, and I am always in search of balance.
And each week we provide and create a brave space where we engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
Yes, and our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for those people in recovery.
By tackling topics sometimes used to separate us.
Mm-hmm.
But before we do that, like, subscribe, comment, and ding that bell.
Ding that bell. Oh my God, how smooth was that?
That was so smooth.
Oh my
Yes.
That's what it looks like when it works.
Well, we're all in the room together.
I fumbled a little bit, but
That's
you all
okay.
did
It was
very
good.
well.
There's a bug.
It was smooth.
That's
Yes.
okay.
Now that we're all here together, what do we do?
I don't know.
Party! Hey!
So how's everybody?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I wasn't expecting the dampness.
I like your eye makeup.
Thank you.
It's captivating. I just want to look at your eyes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to see on the camera, but
I'll tell people. I'll describe it. It's captivating.
All right now.
right. How about you? Lulu?
I'm good. I'm good. It's like, it's been a steady week, I'm here. I'm alive.
All right, she's ready to go.
She's steady.
Yes.
She's regular.
So,
I am regular.
speaking of regular,
Mm.
let's talk about God.
Wait, I didn't even tell you how I was doing.
Yeah, how are you doing?
But since we're on the topic.
I thought you did.
we just
No, I didn't.
We just lawnmowered over
No, I was just saying I liked your eyes, and you
Oh, well,
just
I
were
thought that's all you needed.
you were taken by my compliment. I am good. I'm still getting. I don't think I actually have a cold. I think what's happening is that I have been overworking myself, and my body's
You're
just
going
kind of
through
like,
you're going through puberty.
man, it really does feel
Me
like I'm
too.
going through puberty.
Yeah.
I see what you did there.
I'm just going the other way.
It's kind of fun to talk and like shake your shoulders,
Is it?
like
I
to
like
punctuate things by shaking your
Be all
shoulders.
dramatic.
Well, and with this lighting, it's like I'm gonna blind anyone who's watching.
Yeah, Brendan did a really good job of fixing our lighting before.
Yeah. Well,
We're kind of hard to light, actually.
No, you know what it is for everybody out there. Basically, the lighting is for me. It's like if the lighting is not right, it'll look like there's just two people in the room, and
Okay.
the room is clearly light. Like,
Okay, let's give them something to think about. So, Lewis has a lot more melanin than I do.
I'm black.
Okay.
I know we're kind of like one of those swatches. But like
We're definitely a
very
swatch.
binary, like,
Yeah. I'm like, we are kind of and Bonnie Violet does not have very much melanin.
No.
No.
I might, but not anywhere you can see. I don't know.
Hey.
Right?
Oh.
Oh.
Forget about it.
And I am I'm the color of coffee
Really?
and milk, and olive. People say I have an olive complexion.
You are the color of my coffee because I put a hell lot of cream and sugar in it.
All right.
I don't know. I feel like there's a read in there somewhere. So yeah, let's go back to your question,
About
Bonnie Violet.
God
Yeah,
or being regular.
both.
Both, right. So today's topic is inviting God into all parts of our life in bed.
Yeah.
Like the fortune cookies. Like
Yeah.
when you were a kid, you did that, right? Where you read a fortune cookie and at the end you said in bed.
Yeah. It was the that's what she said before that's what she said.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's like there are probably people who read the title and thought, "Oh, they're going to be talking
They're
about
talking about
stuff in bed."
sex.
Yeah,
Of course
exactly.
we are.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, because it's like we digress.
I mean, Jesus is too hot to not talk about sex.
This is true.
He do got nice abs.
Thank you. Hello.
He do.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
That's
gosh.
what happens when you work with women.
If my
I
family
heard
is
she identifies as non-binary now.
Jesus?
Yes, and uses they them pronouns. That's what I heard.
I'm into it.
Yes.
If my family's listening to this, I'm gonna hear it after this. I'm most certainly gonna
We're
hear it
not
after
being
this.
blasphemous. It's all done in love.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't say like Jesus is ugly.
no.
You just did, but
Okay, so God. So maybe we should talk about how we got to this topic.
Okay.
well, last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last week we were talking about what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And then it ended up turning into a lot of God talk.
Yep, that's right.
Yes. And so we thought, let's talk more about God.
Yep.
I know I've been struggling with like God identity crisis, maybe. Like
Mhm.
I've been challenged by my theology, I guess, if you
Mhm.
will, or just really trying to see a God that makes sense in how I know and see the world at this time of my life.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I hear that. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, and I feel like that is probably especially complex for you because you have a history in the church, don't you?
Yeah. Yes, I
Yeah,
think
you
so.
were like
And
born
I
and
think,
yeah, you had that whole brand, that Jesus brand T-shirts.
yeah, totally. I had like when I was 18, yeah, I totally sold Christian,
Mhm.
t-shirts. But I think also part of it is just, more and more of like Christian, like there's just so much light being brought on the colonizing and there's
Mhm.
just so much bad attached to it. It's really hard to like even try it. It's like, why even try
Mhm.
to like be okay with it? Like,
Mhm.
why does it even matter if they love me as a trans person? Because many of them don't. I think especially as a trans person again, and a trans person who is on social media and out in the public,
Mhm.
I hear a lot more. I just get a lot of, repent, or people will just call me a man, or, just, things like that. So I think that definitely, and almost always those are people who identify as a Christian.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Not to say that all Christians are like that.
Right.
But,
right.
I don't know.
The
It's
ones,
hard.
the ones who are most vocal, are like that. A lot, it's almost like hello, and maybe that's
Mhm.
to say something clearly. It's like, because with my reckoning, or what I understand about Christianity or being a Christian, is that you are flawed, you are not perfect, and it is it is it is that you use so that you can find yourself, and it's not about me judging or me. It's me minding my own business, because my relationship with my higher power that I choose to call God, and even before, was a personal relationship. And the only reason why I would talk about it with someone
Mhm.
is if that's what the conversation was. I wouldn't.
Mhm.
You don't just strike up a
Mhm.
random conversation with somebody and say, "Well, this is what my God thinks about."
Right.
Who cares? Who cares?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm just. Oh, it's Romans 3:23. For we are all sinners and fall short of the glory of God.
Absolutely.
I remember when I was a teenager, I would bring that up a lot in conversation with people who would try to weaponize the Bible against me.
Absolutely. It was this constant contradiction, because
Mhm.
if you say God is love, and then you turn around and say that God
Is vengeful,
is
is
this
going to
and
send
that.
you to
Mhm.
hell.
Yeah,
Like
this is
all this,
nonsense.
it's
Yeah.
hard
Mhm.
to
It
definitely make
was
sense of.
growing up. I was always conflicted about this, because this just didn't make any sense. And like, I remember when I was younger, I had an experience where I went to this place, the Church of San Francisco, Church of God, whatever.
Is Church of San Francisco?
The
Yeah,
church,
I think
no,
there was
they weren't based in. It was one of these traveling churches.
It was a pop-up church.
Exactly. They had like a space.
Mhm.
It's like Church of San Francisco in Christ. And what I know to be true now, at least my experience, it was a cult.
Mhm.
Because the way in which they recruited me from in school, and then when I ended up leaving, because it's like they had this period of like, where you're gonna count your cost and review, and they had asked someone who was struggling to leave the church because of. And I was thinking, this is weird, because
Right.
if I'm struggling, this is when I need the support the most. And there were a lot of other, again, back with all the contradictions. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. And it was, my head was about to explode. And I'm all, if this is it, I don't want anything to do with it. And when I left, everything that I did with the church, the connection, I just shut down. I didn't even pray. I didn't even pray, because I was just so traumatized by the whole experience.
Right. The issue, at least. Okay, so I grew up Christian. I grew up Catholic, and my family is very devout. And what's always been confusing for me, at least as I got older, is that I don't know if we're still on air, but if we are, but our power just went out. But what I want to say is that I think that most people, they can grasp the idea of a God, right? I think where things start to kind of splinter is when we introduce the idea of of Jesus, right? And so if I understand Christianity is that in order to call yourself a Christian, you have to believe in the Holy Trinity, so Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And then that's where things get complicated for people, right? Because I think, at least in recovery, for example, with the third step, we can talk about a God. But Christians, there might be some Christians out there that say, well, the only way to God is through Christ. And I think that's where things get complicated for people, because across the world, there are different ways to God, right? There are different ways to
I think part of that,
up a mountain.
I think my biggest critique about a lot of religion is that there's like gatekeepers, it's like you have to actually go through people to get to God, which is like not helpful. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a lot of the problem with, at least my experience with churches. It's like you have to go through somebody else to get to God, but you can only go through one person. You can only go through a person and only get so much from a person before you actually need to get what God can only give you.
Right. Right.
And actually what we're learning now is like, you don't even need to go through anyone else but yourself.
Exactly.
God's within you. It's like,
right. I think that's I think correct me if I'm wrong, that's like one of the kind of like basic tenets of Buddhism, is that we are part of, or at least in Vedanta for sure, that we are part of the divine, that we can access the divine from within ourselves, as opposed to having to go through something else.
Well, and I think depending on how you put your language, I think a lot of religions believe that we are, like we're a part of God, or we are God and created God.
I've
like
heard that we are God. Like there are stories that suggest that in the beginning there was God, and God was by God's self and wanted to know God, and so the best way to know God was to step outside of God. If you think of God as, like I always try to, when people use the pronouns, I usually try to just stick with God, because I had this bishop that said, and it helped me to understand it so clearly. God will do what God said God will do. God is just God. So God can be whatever God needs to be for you. But God, And like I totally like latched onto that idea that we're all God. If we're created in God's image, not a physical God, not physical, but our creation in God's image is that spiritual part of us.
Right.
We all look the same spiritually if we're doing what we need to do. So
right. I was just thinking too about how I think there's this like really interesting thing that happens with humans, is that we can't help but contradict ourselves, even like maybe not in word, but like in action. And so what I was thinking of are like the Catholic mystics. And so the Catholic mystics, this was around the same time that, so the Catholic mystics were basically people who were experiencing God for themselves, right? So there's that famous statue, it's like the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, and she's like experiencing God, and it looks like she's having an orgasm, right? And so that to me feels like an embodiment of contradiction, but I was supposed to go through Christ to get to this. But here we have a saint who's having this experience, right? And then we also have like, I think they're called the Sophies, the people who like spin around in circles and they get themselves into kind of like a trance-like state, which is
Pentecostals.
The Pentecostals. That's like the speaking in tongues. I had people in my family that were Pentecostals. Were you Pentecostal?
I spoke in tongues.
Yeah, okay, but you weren't Pentecostal.
No, I was like non-denominational,
which
I've heard is just like, like
I needed crystal meth to speak in tongues. And a lot of
it was scary. My family also, I mean, some people in my family did the speaking in tongues. They did the jumping and getting the Holy Spirit. And there was a lot of that stuff going on.
It felt real at the time. Like I don't want to talk like shit about it, but there was a time when it felt good and it felt correct. I think it's hard to, I don't know. It's just, I don't know, like after living life for so long, it's really hard to just trust even those experiences I had for so long, because there's so much that can be done. There's so much manufacturing and like performance that happens like in church and like most things. And that is good because we are trying to have an effect, but sometimes it can feel like it can be manipulative. So it feels hard to really trust it.
Yeah, I hear that. For folks at home, if you're listening in, you have any thoughts that you want to share with us about God, anything that comes up to you, either in favor of, against, some confusion or questions you might have, please chime in. So one person said there is no God. That's definitely one. That's one idea.
Exactly. That's definitely one idea.
Yeah, I think it was Nietzsche that said that humans killed God, or there is no God or God. I think it was Nietzsche. But the idea wasn't that I don't want to get too far with this, but the idea wasn't that there isn't an existence of God, but that humans have essentially killed off this greater being by virtue of creating these manufacturing an idea of
Absolutely. And
spirituality.
that's something that you said last week, whether or not we created God because it was something that we needed,
Right.
you know, and whatever. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I love, or the thoughts that I like now, is this idea that God, universe, like energies, whatever it is, I feel like there is something that holds us and pulls us all together and connects all of us. And that is the shit I sometimes call God. But like, I think the thing that's important about that energy and everything is that it's not something that created me. It's something that continues to create me. And I think one of the things that's changed in my life that I'm really excited about is I feel like I'm actually being an active co-creator in my life and who I am and how I impact the world around me, where for so long I just was created by everything else. Yeah.
Well, I don't remember the person who commented. Last name was Miller. I would love, Joe, I would love to hear. That's a very like provocative statement, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so I'd be really interested in hearing what where that's coming from. So when you say there is no God, can you tell us a little bit more about how you arrived at there is no God? While you're doing that, I did find the quote. It was Nietzsche. The quote is, "God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him." Right. And so that idea.
Well, isn't it when you stop believing in anything, it dies, and you know?
Yeah.
Like Santa Claus?
Well, I mean, there are enough people that still
believe in Santa Claus.
Well, the idea of Santa Claus dies because it's like a long time ago I realized my mom and dad were buying the gifts, and when we didn't have the gifts, I didn't blame Santa Claus.
But in some sort of like understanding, Santa Claus is real, because Santa Claus is the thing that causes, you know what I mean? Like it's not like the literal aspect of, you know, a white man in a sleigh, you know, like that literal aspect. But there is kind of this, because you believe in Santa Claus, there is kind of this existence of Santa Claus, even if it's, you know what I mean? Like it's still there.
Yeah, I feel like we need to pause there. We're not, because it almost sounds conspiracy, like we're saying that there is an actual Santa Claus. That's not what's happening here. We're not like an offshoot of QAnon.
Exactly.
But I know what you're saying. Maybe Bonnie Violet is. She did say she was questioning God.
That's our next topic. QAnon.
But I think I understand what you're saying. Basically, something does exist if there's a belief that it exists. Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Yes, and if it causes you to do things and you have a relationship with it, then it's something.
Right. And I like to believe that God doesn't need me to believe in God for God to exist. Like my God is much bigger than my beliefs.
Absolutely.
Right. Go ahead.
No, it's like, I agree with you. It's like, I think that my higher power has always kind of had my back, even when I didn't have my own back and I didn't believe. And I always say, like, my higher power is on every corner trying to get my attention constantly. And even if I didn't pay attention then, or if I never pay attention, it's still okay.
Right.
There's absolutely nothing that I need to do. That's grace. That's nothing that I need to do. I just need to exist. And it makes my life infinitely better if I exist with acknowledgement and I understand and I participate in this kind of recreation of me constantly. Yeah.
It's like I was saying last week, is that recovery gave me God back, because I had like all these initial struggles. What?
I just said God in quotes.
Yeah, that God gave me God back. Because there was such a fight early on in my life. And as I got older and as I like started doing 12-step and I started kind of not fighting anymore, I opened myself up to this experience that I wasn't ready for it. You know what I mean? Like when you have that experience where my thought was like, oh my gosh, like this entity, this thing that's bigger than me has always existed. And there's some sadness behind that for me, because, and I've said this last week, it's like I've had this experience and I have this connection with this thing and I want the world to have it. Yeah. You know, and maybe religious institutions are also maybe have that intention. Who knows, right? Because humans are inherently flawed. You know, best case scenario, if we're giving the benefit of the doubt, maybe that's the spirit behind the Crusades. You know, like, you know what I mean? Who knows?
Well, think that it is. It's just that some people are overzealous. It's like when we first get recovery and we get it early on and it's feeling good for us. We want everybody to have it.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that some people approach it different. They come at it different. And to hear that they approach it different really kind of, it can mess up what I've got working on because I'm all, this is mine. This is good. It must be good. So it must be how everybody's doing it. And if somebody's doing it differently, what does that mean about mine?
Right,
you know?
Were you going to say something?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm laughing because I feel this so hard. I was just at a meeting and there's this person who's relatively new to the program. And every time they open their mouth, like they speak of recovery as though they've known it. They wrote the book. They, Bill Wilson consulted them. You know what I mean? It's and that has been so hard for me to listen to. But I get that. I get like you're so pumped about this thing and things are finally starting to click with you that you want to spread the good word, you know?
And I think that's why, because even like, you know, the 12-step program, you can fight like whether religion or God or whatever that is. But I think they were well aware of the harm that religion and God, if you will, has caused in the world. And so I think that's why they also had the principle of, you know, attraction, not promotion.
Speaking of the good word, I think we have another comment.
Oh, let's see it. Angel says,
Oh, she's trying to keep us on topic.
oh, hey, miss, what'd she say? What'd she say? I joined late. How we invite God? Why should we invite God? When do we start to invite God? Does God even want to be here?
Jesus.
She showed up late and with all the questions.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
I joined late. How would we invite God? How should we?
Well,
Is this Angel?
It is Angel. It's Linda Summers.
Linda Summers. I just want to
Miss
say,
Castro Country
Miss Castro
Club.
Country Club. She threw an amazing fundraiser mascara just was it this past week?
This past weekend, yes.
Linda, it was absolutely amazing. Probably one of the best I've ever. Yeah.
Yeah, because you probably hadn't gone to any that were hosted by me.
See, I forgot to be diplomatic. I think I was out during that time, so maybe.
No, it's all good.
But Linda, it was absolutely fantastic, and I just wanted to make sure we gave you, I gave you some kudos on yours.
Yes, I think it was beautiful.
It was great.
It was amazing.
Well, I think maybe I'm partial because it was all things Spanish music.
Well, no, and I think that's great because one of the things, and this is off track, but it's like as like an African American or Black Miss Castro Country Club, it was like, do I want to have a show that's just this or just that or whatever? Because I want to invite everyone in. But there's a way for people to, just like it happened this week, for people to do that and have everybody be a part of it in a way that is beautiful.
Yeah, I felt like that was an excellent display of like the celebrating of culture.
Absolutely.
Right. That I didn't feel like anyone was appropriating anything and it's interesting, and then we can go back to topic, but it's interesting because that day after I was like ranting and raving about it, and I had mentioned it to someone, and they said, and I quote, well, I just don't know that I could have enjoyed it because I don't speak Spanish. And I'm like, girl, half of the people in that room didn't speak Spanish, but like you can dance, you can vibe.
Dance. It was beautiful. And
anyway, Linda, kudos to you. Great job. But to your questions, Brandon, could you post them back up?
God.
Yeah.
There was like, how do you invite? I joined late.
Well, you joined late, so you should start showing up on time.
Yeah, that's your first thing. That's how you
show up at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. A good steward would even get here early.
I know, exactly. Waiting there for us to say
you are lost sheep and you have found your way.
I think the invitation of God is interesting because I think, like to some degree, I feel like God never left.
Yeah, exactly.
However, I think that we do have an experience in which God isn't with us or that we're not with God. And I've also heard the term that God is a gentleman, that God doesn't go where they're not wanted or invited.
Oh,
exactly. If God, like what it says, it's like God only seeks, God only
God likes consent.
Yeah, God only seeks those who ask for God,
But I think there's also because I feel like there's plenty of times when I say God didn't show up because I didn't see God, but now I can look at my life now and I can see that God was there, and I'm good with it.
So it's a matter of being aware.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how you invite any presence that you think of as your higher power. Once I invite the awareness in, then that's when I invite this, because
and I think the thing about, and I don't know if this is like all queer, I'm going to say for all queer people. No, I'm just talking for me as a queer person. I grew up with this thing and this connection that I would say is God, or as a child learned was God and everything that God had created. And then I got into a point in my life in which I was unaligned by that understanding of God. And then I was told that I couldn't access that part of me, and I couldn't have a relationship with that part of me. And that part of me actually, like I was just shit,
Yep.
And so I think, so I was ripped away from that part of me that was actually in my spirit. It was always there. And I think that was kind of the gift of program, and some of the work of getting into recovery was not only just getting away from drugs and alcohol, but it was actually the recovery from the harm of being told the lie and believing the lie that I was not worthy, or I was no longer of God or worthy of God or part of God, which was a lie that I believed. And because I believed it, I lived life without it. And that, I think, that was difficult.
Right.
I don't know how else to say it.
No, I get it. You're reminding me of, I think you said awareness is how this all started. And I think it's really clever how in like the third step, it says all we need is willingness. Like that's all we need. You don't actually have to believe, you just have to be willing that maybe there's something.
I believe that you believe.
It's easier.
Like,
I think sometimes it's easier when you don't know.
Yeah.
To some degree,
Right.
like, because like once you figured it all out, then you're like, oh, well, I don't know.
Well, yeah,
Right.
I think
Right.
those who I think in the reading, it's like those who've never believed have an easier time than those who are already kind of
Because
scarred.
often what I need is beyond what I am able to understand or to
absolutely.
create on
Oh,
my own.
amen. Well
And-
said, Bonnie.
And I have to
Yeah.
surrender to
Mhm.
that thing that I sometimes call God in order to begin to experience that. So, and that is a difficult thing to do, because I think as a human, or as me, I've always wanted to, like, I want to know, I want to understand, I want to figure it out.
Yeah.
And there are just capacity to fully understand. However, I do believe that inside me resides the knowing, that I actually know it
Yeah.
all. I
Mhm.
just don't have the capacity to understand it at this point in time in my life. And it's something that's been there, since I was, I don't know.
Yeah, I had a clinical supervisor whose approach was spiritual, which is very different from anything else, any of the other training that I had. And he said to me, you already know all the things you need to know. Like, you were brought to this work because you know what you need to know. And so much of what we're doing, at least in spiritual practice, is unlearning things,
yeah.
right? And becoming kind of open. It reminds me too of like the role that fear has in separating us from like each other or from a power greater than ourselves. I also really appreciate what you said about the lie, right? I think the lie for me, I have such a hard time accepting this idea that somebody else gets to tell me with this power greater than me, this thing that has created all things, that they somehow know something about this thing that I don't know, and that they somehow can tell me what my relationship is with this thing.
Yeah.
And then God.
I think that defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, go ahead.
I was going through a period, like, again, this was around the time when I left that church, and I was trying to kind of, and it was, I guess there was a little gap, but it was me trying to kind of find out how I fit and how I work with God or whatever. And I picked up the Conversations with God. But instead of reading the book, I listened to the tape. And what was really cool is like they had the voices of God as Ed Asner and Ellen Burstyn, and it kept going back and forth. And basically, it was just an individual writing letters to God, and God was answering the questions. And what is most amazing, I think we talked about this before, the people who have been most vocal about Christianity and God or whatever are the ones who have kind of shaped kind of the conversation in a way. And there are more people, I believe, than not who understand that God is not some man in the clouds.
I agree.
God is just spirit. God is, like when we say God is everything or God is nothing. And it was such a gift reading that, and then even kind of going on that path that helped me get to a place where I can have a relationship with a God that I believe is everything, and I don't have, like I said last week, that I'm not offended by, because I didn't understand completely, and I was letting man get in the way of my relationship with divine.
Right.
And that was.
I had you were going to say something about it?
No, are there hand signals that I'm not aware of because I'm not in studio that much?
Well, it's because
I keep getting
Brandon, a
distracted.
closed mouth doesn't get fed.
Is there a comment? Is that what that means?
Oh, it's damn, Jaylon coming in.
Jaylon coming in strong.
Well, Strong. Okay, Jaylon says, the topic is so nuanced because when we talk about God, we have to remember that God is interpreted differently for everyone. I heard once that God isn't the problem, it's the people that worship. Did I skip a line?
No, you're
No,
not.
you're
Okay.
good.
I resonated with that statement because the relationship between me and my higher power is personal, and it's up to me to nurture it and allow space for it. Recently, I had a revelation, no pun, that was pretty good. I loved it. That maybe my recovery journey is the process in which I get to get closer to the God of my understanding.
Very well said.
Very well said, Jaylon.
Yes.
I
Very
love
well said,
Jaylon.
Jaylon.
Yes, exactly, Jaylon. It's like you're gonna have to join us
Their
in,
voice.
in the studio one of these
Take
days.
it to church.
Yes, they always have something great.
I
to
pull
say.
out my tambourine. Okay.
Right.
I wanted to. There were some. Oh, well, maybe we should have a direct comment on this.
Well, no, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like we talked about it before. It's like it's like it is a relationship that is personal to each of us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like I think that maybe, and I'll just speak for myself. Maybe it's my doubts about my relationship that would cause me to want to question somebody else's relationship with. I believe that like any friendship, like any relationship, if I want it, I nurture it. Just like I was saying last week, I talk to my higher power like I talk to my friends.
Mhm.
Right.
I just, and I speak any way I want it. I don't there's no restrictions around it. If I need to curse and say something to make my point, I'm going to do it.
Right.
You know, if I call, hey girl, whatever.
Yeah.
Because this is who I am, and I think that my higher power loves me and is inspired by me living.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that stuck out with me with what Jaylon said as well is that idea that like it wasn't God, but it was like church, or it was the group of people, which I think coming from Jaylon's perspective and point of view, that makes a lot of sense. I've sometimes seen or experienced where people who are in church, people who are of God, blame it on people and not God, but don't like, they kind of do like a bypass of it. So they don't get critical about the way their church is and the way things are to where that doesn't keep happening. They just say, oh, we're humans, we're fucked up, but God is good. And I just don't, sometimes I just feel like it's like one of those complacent kind of like, I don't know, spiritual bypass comments that I don't think that's what Jaylon was saying in that moment, but I've sometimes heard that from other people and I just don't buy it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't buy it either. You were saying earlier about, I don't remember what it was exactly, but it reminded me of this author, Rick Warren. Are y'all familiar? He wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. And I remember I was introduced to that book really early on. I think my aunt had introduced me to it. My aunt was that, who's, she and I have had some tension or conflict around it, but she continues to be a very like strong spiritual person in my life, which is very interesting to me. So Rick Warren, he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, and he talks about how you can take anything to God. You can yell at God, you can curse at God, you can cry, you can laugh with God, right? And you can do all of these things. And I remember feeling so inspired by this book. And then I found out that he was this like staunch homophobe. And I was like, how do I hold this? Right? Can I accept that my God spoke through this person and that this person is still human? Because I still, this was years ago. I think I was a teenager. I am still conflicted by that here was this man who inspired me that God spoke through. And yet this is someone who doesn't believe that I'm like worthy of that message or what have you.
But I think the thing that's powerful in that for like somebody like is that if that man who is fallible in those ways can still be a channel of God, then I can too.
Right.
So me knowing my own failings or the way that I look at like how I fall short or whatever, that still tells me that God can channel and speak through me too.
It's just like finding, how you meet someone and they turn out to be shady as fucking total douchebag, whatever. But they introduce you to people in your life that become the most important people to you, no matter that they are.
Sounds very specific.
Sounds very specific. Sounds very pointed.
You know who you are. You know who you are, dude. Where's my camera?
Well, I think we have
don't even listen to us.
Hold on, we have another comment coming in. I guess they're all coming in. Angel says, thank you all for sharing your perspective and for trying to answer my questions. I love to invite God when I am getting ready for a show, but it took others doing it, so I can't start practicing it by myself.
She is so shady.
But
all the time.
She
can't help it.
Back
to that. One of the parts of the question that we didn't ask, the reason why I want to invite God into is because I need to be present. I need to be present, especially in certain situations. Like when I put myself in sexual situations or whatever, if I go in the way I had been going in, asleep, using it as a way of checking out, then I stand to hurt myself and maybe the other person.
like when you go into sex asleep?
Sex or anything, yeah. I stand to hurt myself and the other person. But when I bring God into it, and when I bring God into it, that's me thinking about my sexual idea.
Is it about you bringing God into it, or is it you noticing God is in it?
Noticing, bringing.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe
It sounds like a what is a koan? Koan.
You know, I think that's probably a better way of saying that. Noticing that God is here regardless. Like God's holding the camera.
Right, exactly.
Miller, if you're out there, I don't remember what his first name was. If you're out there, I'm still interested. Joe Miller. Joe, if you're still out there, I'm still very much interested. We're still very much interested in what motivated your thought. In the meantime, we have another message coming in from Luca. Luca says, "God is love. I call my higher power love, and love is all around."
Absolutely.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Anka writes, does somebody else want to take that?
Go ahead.
Anka, I love you, Anka. Thank you. The German god that I grew up with was terrifying man in the sky, watching my genitals with great interest. This made me ashamed of anything to do with expressing my sexuality. I had to deprogram.
Yeah,
that's
correct. So many
That's
people's
so real.
experience.
Yeah. I remember like when I learned how to masturbate, I felt guilty every single time, and I cried. Well, no, I didn't think I was going to go blind. I thought I was going to lose the ability to have children.
And shame is not of God. That is of the devil.
You know, every time you say
the devil.
Every time you say of God, I'm thinking of Warren from Handmaid's Tale. Of God, of Warren. Y'all remember Warren? Yeah, of Warren. There were a couple things that I just wanted to say before we transition out of this. So
transition.
You don't own that word. One of the things, these are just my opinions. I feel that one of the things I've noticed in my life as a person and as someone who works in mental health is that I feel gay people have been robbed of God in a lot of ways. And by that, I mean, a lot of gay men that I've met struggle with this idea of God. And a lot of it has to do with the way the church was used against them. And so they believe that they're atheists. And I'm going out on a limb here, but they believe that they're atheists. And really my sense is that it's like this anger that, you know, how can I believe in this thing that never believed in me? And I just felt the need, I felt compelled to share that I think that gay people have been really wronged. And at the same time, you know, there are people out there that are helping bridge that gap. You know, there are more institutions that are now inviting more people in. And of course, there are other faiths, right? I think Wicca has always embraced of queer folks. Buddhism has always embraced queer folks.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would maybe challenge to that is like, we are all people who have found solution in God, I think, and as using God in recovery, and that works well for us. So I think it's hard. I know it's hard for me to think that somebody else would have a different way. So I would want to just leave space that people might not need God in order to feel good about their gay or to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know. I agree with that. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I definitely believe in that too. I think maybe where I'm going with this is that ultimately, I think gay folks have been, for reasons like not of our control, have been essentially cut off from some spirituality or something that's bigger than us. My last two thoughts. I was thinking about the Confessions of St. Augustine, which was written by St. Augustine. And there was one other book, it's called Inspired, and I forgot the name of it. Anyway, I bring up those two texts because the Confessions of St. Augustine were written by St. Augustine. And what I loved about that book was that it was so relatable. And here's this saint who's talking about gambling and having sex and having all of these like questions. And I feel like a lot of times, at least for me, what makes kind of spirituality sometimes inaccessible is that they're written about like these people are kind of superhuman or not human at all. Yeah. And
yes,
there we go. We have 6 minutes.
Yes, which means we kind of sort of start to
start wrapping up.
Well, as usual, everyone, you can always reach me on the gram at Lulu86. But before you move on to the next person, I wanted to mention this. I would be remiss. One of the places where I was able to, at the beginning of my recovery, you know, just before I actually stepped into recovery, start to work on my relationship with my higher power and God, was at the City of Refuge Church. It was located in San Francisco here, but now it's in Oakland. And it is presided over by Bishop Yvette Flunder, who is the same gender loving woman, and they speak of radical acceptance. What I love is that she always says it's like, bring your luggage here because someone has a matching set. And I think that you don't necessarily need to go that route, but honestly, because the conversation was in this vein, it is a good idea to kind of just share that. So anyway,
Yeah.
Louie Lou 86.
Yeah, I've heard their stuff. It's really, really good. Bonnie Violet here. You can find me at A Queer Chaplain on all the things. I'm like 20 days away from the Dragon Spirituality Summit that'll be taking place in Chicago, October 7th, 8th, and 9th. But we're going to be launching all the information about how you can participate virtually. We've been like trying not to say that too much because we wanted to get as many people there in real life first.
Word. Good luck.
One thing I wanted to say on God though too, that I like is that spiritual life is more about subtraction than addition.
According to you, or
No, it's like I think Merton, some M guy said some guy with whose last name is
addition rather than
that.
subtraction.
Says you.
Like,
Says you.
more
Says
about
Bonnie Violet
subtraction
from the
than
book of Bonnie
addition.
Violet.
No, please no.
I hear it. We can talk afterward. I meant to say earlier, I wanted to put a shout out out there for Reverend Gowdy, who was the Reverend of the Metropolitan Community Church out in Allentown, Pennsylvania. She's still the Reverend there, also same gender loving, who helped kind of bring me back to something that was really fulfilling with respect to my spirituality and God. And so shout out to Reverend Gowdy and the Metropolitan Community Church and the whole fellowship out there. You can find me at ALucasCCC on Instagram. Or you can email me or anyone here at castrocountryclub.org. And then finally, you can leave us a message on SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/@the-CCC.
The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ plus recovery community.
They provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
The vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support. Connection. You can find more information at Castro Country. I will keep wanting to say.
There is no L in country.
I keep wanting to say Castro Country Club. CastroCountryClub.org.
Yes, and tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. where we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
And maybe next week we'll actually talk about where we invite God in.
Maybe we should continue this topic because I'm
should.
feeling a fire here. There was a lot of audience participation. If anyone out there disagrees with us picking this conversation next week, let us know.
There's nobody listening.
Whenever, people listen.
Yes.
Listen. Plenty of people listen.
Yes, and if you are listening or you want to listen, find us on all your favorite podcast sources at dragonspirituality.com. No.
Girl, what? Did you just, we got hoodwinked.
Nice little plug at the CCC.
How did she
wait a minute.
hack us from right here?
She like blacks her faces out. Okay.
That's how it's going to show up. It's like,
All right, we'll see y'all next week.
We love you. Come back.
yes, please. And we're looking for balance.
So much balance. Balance.